continuing to push a false narrative for political purposes.
Sean Spicer responding yesterday to calls for the Attorney General to resign. I wanted you to hear that from his news conference yesterday. We're joined right now by John Malcolm with the Heritage Foundation. He's the director of the Edwin Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at Heritage. John, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for giving us a few minutes today. I want to touch on a couple of subjects. Obviously, the Neil Gorsuch hearings, which are supposed to be coming up a little later this month, and then this issue of recusal for Jeff Sessions. If you don't mind, I'll just mention the recusal issue first.
Sure.
I compared this with the former Attorney General Loretta Lynch choosing not to recuse herself in the Clinton administration. On the Clinton investigation, I should say. In this particular case, Sessions didn't hesitate. He just recused himself. Was it the proper thing for him to do?
Well, that's a judgment only he could make. I mean, if a reasonable person could question his ability to conduct an impartial investigation, then the proper thing to do is to recuse. He decided that discretion was the better part of valor and chose to do so, and I'm certainly not going to second-guess his judgment in that regard. It happens that he doesn't have a deputy at the moment, but he will very shortly have Rod Rosenstein as his deputy. And Rod Rosenstein has served as a U.S. attorney under both George W. Bush and Barack Obama. They held him on in the Obama administration because they thought so highly of his ability to engage in public corruption investigations. So I don't think anybody would be questioning his integrity or forthrightness to pursue this investigation if, in fact, it goes anywhere, although there isn't much evidence so far to go on.
So besides the recusal issue, I've even heard some members of Congress throwing around the word perjury.
Yeah.
Maybe I can get your legal definition of that, and I'm not asking you to pass judgment on whether he perjured himself, but if somebody makes that allegation, there has to be some pretty clear evidence that you flat out lied to somebody under oath, correct?
Oh, yeah. Look, that's totally overblown rhetoric. So in order to convict somebody of perjury, you have to show that they intentionally, willfully lied and did it with a specific intent to deceive. Now, in this case, Senator Franken was asking a question about, were surrogates of the campaign or people involved in the Trump campaign talking to the Russians, about the campaign. Now, maybe he meant it broader than that in terms of have you ever met with the Russian ambassador? But when you're talking about a perjury allegation, it requires a clear question and a clear lie. And it seems pretty clear from the context that at least Senator Sessions could have reasonably construed that question in terms of saying, as a surrogate to the Trump campaign, were you meeting with the Russian ambassador to talk about the campaign? Now, Senator Sessions was also a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Foreign Intelligence Committee. He would certainly have opportunities to meet with ambassadors of all kinds, not often, but periodically, to talk about things totally unrelated to the campaign. So, could he have given a more fulsome answer? Yes, I suppose so. But to accuse him within the context of that question of willfully deceiving the United States, the Senate Judiciary Committee, is a bit of a stretch. So I do not see this going anywhere in terms of a perjury prosecution, and I think that accusation is actually more political grandstanding than anything else.
Yeah, it certainly strikes me that way. Well, I appreciate getting your point of view on that. Neil Gorsuch, are they still planning on moving ahead with his confirmation hearings later this month?
Oh yes, absolutely. That hearing is scheduled to start on March the 20th. Senator McConnell has said that come hell or high water, he wants to have a vote to confirm by November the 10th. That is significant in a couple of ways. One, because the Senate goes on a 2-week recess, Easter recess, after November 10th. And two, if he is confirmed by April 10th.
Okay. I never.
If he is confirmed by April 10th, then he would be able to sit with the Supreme Court for its last series of oral arguments before the term ends in June, and he could be, voting on those cases. So yes, this thing is going to kick off on March the 20th, and we will see whether they're able to get him confirmed by April 10th or not. I think they will, and I think they should, but we'll see.
That's only about 2 weeks, right? Am I adding that up correct? March 20th to April 10th.
Yeah. So they're going to have 4 days of hearings. and then they can take about a week before the Senate Judiciary Committee votes, and then sends the matter to the full Senate for consideration. The interesting question, I mean, I don't think there's any question that if Neil Gorsuch gets an up or down vote, he is going to get confirmed. There isn't a single Republican that's going to cross over, and he may well get some Democratic support as well. The interesting question is whether or not the Democrats are going to attempt to mount a filibuster, and if they do, whether they'll be able to do it successfully.
Yeah, and whether or not the Republicans would be willing to go nuclear, I guess, is the big question. Do you think Gorsuch's, I know there was some debate when he had a conflict with the president over his comments on the judiciary, but has he done anything that you've seen so far that might damage his relationship with any of these Democratic senators he's got to meet with?
Absolutely not.
No.
This is a guy who, when he was nominated in 2006, was unanimously confirmed 2 months later. 12 sitting senators voted for him at the time. Even people who may end up opposing him, like Dick Durbin, have said, look, I thought highly of him at the time that he was on, and I haven't seen anything so far that leads me to question that judgment. But, of course, their base, the Democratic base, they're mad as hornets, and they want to see the Democrats fighting. They're mad because they lost an election they thought they had in the bag. They're mad because Merrick Garland didn't get a vote or even hearing last year. And so it'll be interesting to see whether or not the Democrats decide to filibuster or whether they keep their powder dry for the next vacancy, which will be far more consequential to them.
We're talking to John Malcolm from the Heritage Foundation. One last question, John.
Sure.
It's clearly the Republicans view it as critical, and I do too, to get Gorsuch seated as quickly as possible, because there are some key decisions coming down that you don't want decided on a 4-4 vote, correct?
Well, if you have a 4-4 vote, what ends up happening is that the lower court judgment gets just entered. It's as if they decided not to hear the case in the first place. So it doesn't get the stamp of approval of the Supreme Court, but the lower court's judgment stands. So look, they could, with respect to this last tranche of cases, if there are any cases that divide them 4-4, they could decide to have them re-argued in October once Gorsuch is on the court. But yes, it would certainly be nice to get him up there. There are a couple of cases scheduled for oral argument at the end of April that might very well be divide the court 4-4, and there's no reason to delay this any further. I mean, this is a guy with a 10-year track record on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. He's a very distinguished judge. There's plenty. He answered a questionnaire and hundreds of pages of answers. So there's no reason why they shouldn't proceed with it.
And procedurally, he wouldn't be able to vote on a case if he was not seated yet to hear the oral arguments, correct?
That's right.
Okay, I thought so. All right, good. John Malcolm from the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for your time.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, you have